Good Shabbos, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. So because Purim just happened, I want to begin by talking about masks and costumes. So raise your hand if you are someone who likes costumes and masks. Okay. Now raise your hand if you are someone who does not like costumes or masks. I feel like not everyone is raising their hands. I'm just going to call people out on that. Huh? Okay. So could we have maybe a volunteer from the category of people who enjoy wearing masks and costumes to maybe say in one sentence what it is about masks and costumes that you like? We have a volunteer. Yes, please.
Another being incarnates.
Okay, another being incarnates. When you put on a costume or a mask, you have an opportunity to become someone different. Great, thank you. And could we hear from Allegra, is that a comment about why you don't like masks?
No, I do.
Okay. Why do you like masks?
Because I can let other parts out.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so
Letting someone's inside out.
great. So you can let other parts of you out. I like that. Do we have a volunteer from the camp of people who do not like wearing masks? Why do you not like wearing masks or costumes? Yes.
I just like being myself.
You like being yourself. So you don't like wearing masks or costumes because it feels like it's something, you're pretending to be something that you're not. Thank you. Yes, Richard. It's hard enough to be me. Great. I think we can all relate to that sentiment. Yes, Karen.
So, following on from that, Richard, if it's hard enough to be you, then wearing a costume or mask allows you to take a break from being yourself.
So maybe wearing a mask or a costume allows you to take a break from being yourself. Possibly. So I'm gonna say I don't like wearing masks and costumes, so I'm with that camp. Not that the other category of people are wrong, but just to say sort of where I fall, I'm not a fan of wearing masks and costumes, and I think I've always felt like throughout life I wear enough masks as it is on an ongoing daily basis. And I feel like I'm perpetually in the state of performing in different roles. And at one point in my life, I felt like there was maybe this idealized, authentic, perfect self that like if I stripped away all of these masks, eventually I would find this like true me. And I think the place that I've sort of landed at now is that there isn't for me this authentic self, but just a series of different masks. And I think that part of the work of life and of community is to sort of create spaces and structures where we can bring all these different parts of ourselves together into alignment or into some approximation of alignment. And I think that we have in this week's Torah portion a good manual to at least begin doing some of this work. So this week's Torah portion begins with some of the instructions for the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And what I love about the tabernacle is that it's really a metaphor for building community and for creating spaces where we can bring the totality of who we are. Right, so the very beginning, if you have a Chumash, I'm on page 523, chapter 30 of the book of Exodus, verse 11. We begin with an instruction about everyone has to give this silver shekel, which eventually will get melted down and turned into part of the beams of the tabernacle. And then if we look at verse 17, on page 524, we are told, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Make a laver of copper and a stand of copper for it for washing, and place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. Put water in it, and let Aaron and Aaron's sons wash their hands and feet in water drawn from it." Right, so we have initially here in just the first few verses a couple different descriptions of what people are able to bring in order to make the Mishkan happen. And again, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, as I want to present it today, is really a paradigm for what it means for us to create communities where we are all able to bring all of the different parts of ourselves. And we see this in a few different ways here right off the bat, that people have different ways of contributing. Some people, depending on their age, would bring silver. Other people would bring other materials to build this wash basin thing. And I want to pause on this wash basin thing that we have here, the kior in Hebrew, which is mentioned in verse 18. later on in the Torah, we are told that this wash basin has mirrors as part of its construction. And the rabbis bring up a really beautiful midrash about this. The Torah tells us that these were mirrors donated by women, that the women actually did not take part in the golden calf, which happens later, and they sort of kept back some of their goods, which they eventually used to contribute to the construction of the Mishkan. And one of the things which the women brought were these mirrors. And these mirrors, we are told, were initially rejected by Moses. Moses said these mirrors are sort of like an item of vanity, not something which we want to use in the construction of the tabernacle, in the construction of the wash basin. But the Midrash and Midrash Tanhuma tells us that Moses was told by God that these mirrors, which the women were presenting for the construction of the tabernacle, had actually been responsible for the continuation, for the propagation of the Israelites when they were enslaved in Egypt. The Midrash tells us that when Pharaoh had decreed that any firstborn child was to be cast into the Nile, when Pharaoh had decreed back-breaking labor to the Israelites, when the men were too exhausted physically, too exhausted emotionally, too despondent to want to have children, the women, we are told, would use these mirrors to seduce their husbands. And they would show them the mirrors and say, "Look, I am more beautiful than you." And this worked. There's a lot that we could say about that, but what I want to present here from this midrash and what sort of stood out to me this week when I was reading this, was the idea that these mirrors, which were coming from a different point in time, these mirrors which played this crucial, this fundamental role for the children of Israel when they were enslaved, eventually find another purpose. Right? These mirrors, which were once so vital to the existence, to the procreation, to the continuation of the line of Israelites, get physically remolded and reshaped into something else, into the wash basin used for purity in the tabernacle. And I began this morning by talking about how we all have all of these different parts of ourselves. We all have these very different, disparate lives that we live. And that I think that the role of community is to create spaces where we are able to bring all of these different parts of ourselves. These mirrors, which existed in one world, in a different country, in a different time, in a different place, eventually find a way of being folded into this great metaphor that we have for what community is. Community being a place where we are able to hold each other in the totality of who we are. The Mishkan is constructed by all of us, by all of the people of Israel, bringing what they are able to bring and accepting the offerings with the limitations of each individual person. There's one other very profound way which this week's Torah portion speaks about the ability for community to contain multiplicities and to contain different identities that we all have. At the end of this week's Torah portion, after all these instructions about the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, we have the story of the golden calf when Moses comes down from the mountain and Moses sees the people constructing the golden calf. Moses smashes the 10 Commandments. And the tradition teaches that in the future, in the ark, which traveled around with the Israelites throughout their time in the desert into the land of Israel and beyond, that contained within that ark were both the whole tablets, the second set of tablets, which Moses makes again, and the broken tablets as well. I cannot think of any better metaphor for life than for that ark carrying around 2 sets of tablets. Because all of us have these different parts of ourselves. All of us have within us these parts of us that feel whole, these identities that feel whole, and these identities that feel less formed, that feel more broken. My hope and my blessing for all of us here today is that we are able to do the work of constructing these mishkans, that we are able to create communities, really, truly holy communities, communities where we recognize and honor the multiplicity, the nuance, and the complexity of those before us, and communities where we are able to bring the totality of who we are, communities where we are able to be in true, honest, authentic relationships, where we are able to share with everyone all of who we really are, at least some of the time, as scary as that might be. So for this first Aliyah, I would like to call up anyone who feels called in this moment, in the next few days and weeks and months and years, to striving to building communities of authenticity, communities of love, communities of connection, communities where we embrace and recognize the totality of the people in that community, the complexity of the people in that community, and where we are able to and committed to bringing all of ourselves as well. Shabbat Shalom.